Hello and welcome. My name is Scott, and this is a coffee chat in a van here on my little channel called StaticCampervan. I do this little chat usually weekly, sometimes weekly, and it is just a little informal chat where we get together and talk about a variety of subjects, and that is often about coffee, although not always, but today I thought we'd bring it back to my favorite subject, which is indeed coffee. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about coffee that I just bought here, and we're going to do a little coffee tasting. And just to give you a little backstory, I do live in a van, this van, and I do travel around quite a bit. And that takes me to new and different places. And when I get to those places, I do try to act like a local and also support the local community. And with that, obviously, is drinking local coffee. For one, I think it's a nice change of pace to give me a different flavor in my cup every morning, and late morning and early afternoon and evening, and before I go to bed, I drink a lot of coffee. So I do buy quite a bit of coffee, go through quite a bit of coffee. So it is kind of fun for me to try different coffees, and I also really like to support the local community that I happen to be visiting. That's very important to me. So when I get to a new community, I do try to search out local co-ops. If there's a local co-op in town, I try to do some shopping there. I don't usually do all of my shopping at a co-op, but I do try to do as much as I can because they are locally owned and operated, and I think that's the best way to support a local community. That dollar that you're spending is going to go much farther that way, and so that's one of the things that I do. Great thing about co-ops is they usually have a very good selection of local coffees, and a lot of times they are organic coffees as well. Now, the organic part is not real important to me, but again, the local part is, and so that's where the co-ops I find are the best place for me to shop, at least for my coffee. Try to keep my food budget in check the best I can, and that's a thing that co-ops are not so great about. But local coffees, I really don't give myself a budget for. I just buy whatever I think is going to be good, and hopefully I can find a coffee that I really like. And now I have been hanging out in Humboldt, and Humboldt is a county up in Northern California, very far Northern California, and they have some great coffees in Humboldt, some fantastic small companies that are producing some just really incredible coffee. And I found several companies that I really like. There is one that I have been trying over and over again, and I really like the company, what they do, what they stand for, but I've had a little trouble finding a coffee from that company that I have really liked and have really wanted to buy a second time. So I've been working my way through their coffees that they have on offer. Even though it's a small company, they sell a really large variety of coffees, just an incredible amount of coffees. And I am now going to try, and I have not tried this yet. I just bought this at the co-op the other day in anticipation of running out of the last bag of this coffee. So this is from a company called Humboldt Bay. And one of the things that I have not been too keen on with this company, even though I really like what they're doing, is most of their coffees seem to be a little bit darker roasted. And I really gravitate to the light roast coffees nowadays. So I'm hoping that this bag will be more to my liking. Everything I've tried from this company has been really good and fantastic. The only issue I've had is the darker roast. I'm just not a fan of darker roast coffees. That's just the thing. So this is got an intriguing title to me because it's Humboldt's Finest is what they're calling this. So I'm hoping it lives up to that name. And the interesting thing about this company, and one of the reasons why I like them, is they give you lots of great information on the bag to give you a good idea of what to expect. They also give you some really good instructions for storage and how to grind it properly and to brew it properly. That's all really good information, I think, and I think more companies should do that. The big thing, though, that they do that I think every company should do is to give you a roast level that's on the bag. So this bag does have a roast level on it, and it is on the lighter side, they're saying, although it's interesting to me if you read what they say on the bag here. Let's just read this. Using the best 100% Arabica beans, Humboldt's Finest has a rich dark chocolate with citrus and red berry flavor. 2 of our best medium roasted coffees are blended to create a highly caffeinated and unique flavor. Humboldt's Finest coffee. So that all sounds really good, but the intriguing part with this to me is that a blending of medium roasted coffees, when you look at the little roast meter level here, which is on the lighter side. So I'm curious to see what we're going to find here. So let's open this up and we will take a look at this and see if this is actually a light roast or a medium roast, at least as far as I'm concerned. Now what I've been doing is I just cut the bag open. Most of these bags come with these little ties that you can fold the bag over and push these ties over to keep it closed, and I find these to be really annoying. So what I normally just do is when I close this up, I just wrap it up with a large rubber band. So that's what I'm going to do here. Okay. Wow, this smells good. All of their coffee smells fantastic, but this one smells even better than anything else I've smelled before, so already a good sign. Let's take a little look at it. Okay, so my lighting's a little bit dark here, which is kind of the vibe that I go for with these coffee chats. So I'm not having a real good sense of what the beans are really roasted at, but they are a medium roast. They are definitely a little more than light, so a little more dark roasted than I would prefer, although definitely not a dark roast coffee at all. But that is a little bit darker roasted than I would normally prefer. But again, the smell of this coffee is just fantastic. So what we're going to do here is we are going to grind some up. So I have my hand grinder here. And this is made by a small company called Storesso. I actually have a video on this if you're interested. Not that I'm trying to sell you on buying products, but I like to hand grind my coffee. I like to grind all my coffee right before I'm going to brew it. But I also prefer a hand grinder. It's just my preference. So we're going to grind up some of this. And you know what I did forget to do? A very important step. I forgot to light up the kettle, so let's get the stove on and get the kettle going. Now I can get back to grinding coffee. So I'm going to put a little bit of coffee in here. Now if I were a professional barista, I would be weighing this out and making sure I knew exactly how much coffee I have in the grinder here, but I am not a professional barista, so I just kind of eyeball things, and this is going to be about 15 to 18 grams if you are following along at home and trying to copy what I'm doing. Except I would encourage you not to copy what I'm doing because, again, I'm not a professional barista, and I very rarely weigh out my ingredients as I'm going here. I want this to just be easy, so this is what I do it. This is how I do it. I just eyeball it, and I do try to keep an eye on the grind size. I do like a very particular grind size. That is where this kind of fancy coffee grinder really pays off because it is very accurate. I can set it and it does a really good, accurate job every time. So I've been really liking this grinder. I've had it for quite some time now, over a year, I guess, and I've been really liking it. It's all metal, and it feels that it weighs a ton. So it's not the perfect grinder for a van, I don't think. It's tumbled. It's taken a tumble a few times. I normally keep it up on a shelf up here, and sometimes if I drive, it'll come flying out, and it'll really make a thud when it comes flying out of its little holding spot. So I do try to keep that in mind. But because it's all metal, it is really holding up quite well. It's got some scratches on it over the last few months, but it's really been holding up really well, and still grinds terrifically. So let me grind this up now. Okay, that was quick work there with that. One thing that I find with light roast coffee is it is definitely harder to grind. So even with my kind of poor lighting here for checking out coffee for the first time, I can tell that this is not a very light roast coffee because this was incredibly easy to grind. Although it is very easy to grind with this hand grinder, this handle that they put on it gives you quite a bit of leverage. So even a light roast coffee is easy to grind, but you definitely feel a bit of a different resistance between light roast and medium roast. Of course, dark roast is really easy to grind because that is basically coffee that has been turned into charcoal, and so it grinds pretty easy. And yes, that's kind of shots fired, I guess, because if you like dark roast coffee, you don't like hearing somebody refer to it as charcoal, but it is, unfortunately, that is what it is. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course. If you like that taste, certainly nothing wrong with having your coffee dark roasted. I just prefer the really light stuff. So I can make a few jokes and make a few cracks about dark roast coffee. Okay, so we've got a really nice grind on this. I am going to use my AeroPress here today because, well, again, I'm not a barista. I'm not a professional barista, and so I find that I like to have a good cup of coffee, but I want to have an easy cup of coffee too. So the AeroPress really does work for me in that sense. So I'm going to use the AeroPress here, and it is, it's a plastic tube, and so it's not very classy, but I really like it. AeroPress company has come out with a even larger version of the AeroPress, and I just really don't understand what it's for. I know they try to market it as being easier to make coffee for two people, but I've made coffee for two people quite often with this regular size AeroPress, and I've actually done coffee with the smaller AeroPress, the travel AeroPress, for two people, and I've made it pretty decent cup. I do think it's easier with the larger version here, but I don't really know why I would need an even larger version than just the regular size one here. So this is my favorite one. Now, just going to be a couple of minutes for the water to boil, so we'll reconvene once the kettle comes up to temperature here. Okay, we've got a good rolling boil here on the water. The one thing that I didn't think about sitting here is my sink is behind my phone, which I use as my camera, and that's not the best setup here for this, because I will need to dump some water out in a moment. But we'll do the best we can, right? Okay, so I'm going to put a little water in here. Now, I did wait just a second on the water. You may have noticed. That's one thing that is kind of important to know. And this is something that baristas know, but even us as non-baristas, if you really want a really good cup of coffee, it's good to know about the water temperature with coffee making. Light roast coffee, you need to have as hot a water as possible. So as soon as the water comes to a boil, you want to start brewing your coffee right away. With a medium roast coffee, you want to let it cool just a few seconds. And with the darker roast coffees, you want to let it cool down even more. Tea is that way too. I know black tea and green tea have, I just burnt my finger a little bit there because again, I'm not near my sink, which is kind of an issue. It'll be funny to hear what my voice sounded like when I spilled water all over my finger. Okay, not a problem though. I worked in the restaurant for quite a few years, and I used to be able to handle hot water, very hot water. Of course, we normally had gloves on, but you were constantly having to stick your hands in boiling hot water all the time, nearly boiling water, and you kind of got used to it, but I'm not really used to it anymore. So I just made myself laugh a little bit here. So we're going to let that brew for a few minutes. I like to go about 4.5 minutes on my brew time. And especially when I'm brewing a new coffee that I've never tried before, I really try to make sure that I get the grind size perfectly ground. I do like a kind of a finer grind size. I believe AeroPress recommends a little bit larger of a grind size than I normally use. One of the things that I do differently when I do an AeroPress coffee, I don't really follow the AeroPress company's recommendation on how to brew, but I've just found it works better for me, and I get a better cup of coffee for my taste buds, and that's really what this is all about. That's why I like to talk about how I like light roast coffee. Not everybody does, but it's what I like, and so that's what I'm looking for normally. It'll be interesting, this one here, because this is really what I would call a medium roast coffee, which is interesting because here on the bag, on their little meter, they're really showing it more as a light roast coffee. So I think that just goes to show you that every company kind of grades their coffee differently. And that's the one little thing about Humboldt Bay Coffee, is that they do seem to have a little darker roast level, which is not unusual, of course. That's kind of a normal thing, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest. Seems to be a thing. I think Peet's Coffee started that, and then of course Starbucks, when they kind of took on Peet's model, they kind of took over that as well. And it's not bad. I used to drink really dark roast coffee all the time. It was all I wanted. I didn't want anything but the darkest of dark roast coffee. And I did that for years and years and years. And then I got to a point where I just wasn't enjoying it quite so much. And I started to notice that there were different roast levels with coffee. And that's when I started to kind of branch out a little bit and try different coffees. And for a while, I didn't really like the lighter roast coffee. But over time, I just started to gravitate to it more and more, just because it seemed like there was just so much more flavor there. And that's really what I was after. I don't drink coffee for the caffeine. Caffeine doesn't do anything for me. So I'm drinking just for the flavor, just for the flavor alone. So it kind of takes that whole caffeine thing out of the picture for me. So yeah, I don't want to knock Starbucks, but a lot of people like Starbucks because it's got lots and lots of caffeine in their coffee, and that's kind of what they're known for. But that's not really what I want or need. Since I'm just going for flavor, that's really why I want a lighter roast. And I'm just realizing now I did not look at the time to see where we are on brew time. I wonder if you have been watching and you can tell me what the time is. I don't know. We'll see. I was trying to do this in just one take, although I do think I'm going to try to chop this up a little bit, because grinding coffee to me over the microphone usually sounds a little bit harsh. Whether I leave it in or not, I'm not sure. I do think I will cut out part of the boiling water because that is, well, like watching paint dry. Although quite a few people tell me that my coffee chats are like watching paint dry, and they just don't really care for them. So maybe this is all watching paint dry. I don't know. Okay, now I am going to have to sneak over here and dump my water that I have in my mug out. I always like to add a little bit of water to my mug just to warm up my mug a little bit. I think it's, one, it's good for the flavor of the coffee, but two, I just like to keep my coffee as hot as possible, especially if I'm going to have it open like this without a lid. It's actually a little bit chilly right now, so it's going to cool down quite quickly. Okay, so just a quick reach there, and I've dumped my water out, and now we're going to do a little press on the AeroPress here. And I am quite sure we are well past 4.5 minutes, but that'll be okay. I'm sure it'll be okay. It's probably not the best thing to do for the first time I try this coffee. Usually I really like to watch all of my parameters and try to make the best cup I can possibly make when I'm trying a coffee out for the first time. I just like to make sure that it's going to be as good as it can be. And that sounds like I'm using somebody's tagline, but that's not what I was trying to do. All right. So this is piping hot. And let me get my heavy whipping cream out, because that is what I use in my coffee these days, is heavy whipping cream. Although I really should try this without anything at all, just so I get a proper taste on this. Let's see if I can do this and see if it's not too hot. Okay, so it's a little hot yet, but this is incredible. And keeping in mind, I really didn't follow along on the things I normally do. So normally when I'm brewing up a coffee for the first time, I would weigh out the beans and be very careful about my time on brewing. But I think this is a really good cup of coffee, even though I wasn't paying attention on many of those things. It is quite hot yet, but I can tell that it is a very, very nicely balanced coffee. It's not too dark. I would prefer it to be a little bit lighter of a roast, but it's very flavorful. And you know how I'll like it even better is if I do add my whipping cream here. So we'll do that just a touch. I don't need to add too much. Someone once noticed that, well, probably more than just one person, but I know one person did tell me once that they noticed that I don't stir my coffee, and that really bothered them. And I cannot figure out why that bothers anybody. I never stir my coffee. Put the cream in there, and it just mixes up just fine. Now, there are some clouds there. It's not super well incorporated. Yes, I grant that. But I just don't see the point in stirring my coffee. Why? Why do it? Also, really, why would it bother somebody that I don't stir my coffee? I don't get that either. Let's give this another taste now that it's going to be a little bit cooler with the added whipping cream. Ooh, yeah. This is good. And this is actually a very good result because I have tried very, very many bags, different roast levels, different varieties from Humboldt Bay, and I've been looking for one that I would want to buy again. There have been a few that I would buy again, but they were all a little bit darker roasted than this one. And so I generally don't pick them out again when I go back to the store. This is definitely one I would buy again. This is fantastic, and it definitely is named correctly. It is definitely Humboldt's finest because it is the best, I think. So it's properly named. Yeah, I'm very happy with this coffee, and I am very happy that I finally found it. It's odd. Humboldt Bay coffee is widely sold here around Humboldt County, but this Humboldt's finest is not widely available. And I imagine that is because it is one of their lighter roast coffees, and so it's probably the reason why they don't stock it in every store, because it is a Pacific Northwest thing that people want their coffee to be darker. That's just my guess, but I'm glad I finally found it. I just need to remember where I bought it so I can buy it there again. But yeah, really good coffee. And you know, the moral of the story here is buy local coffee, because it usually is always the best coffee you can get. So that's another reason why I do like to buy a local coffee whenever I move to a new area. One, I'm helping out the local economy, and two, it's fresher. It's been roasted in the area that you're in. It hasn't been roasted across the country somewhere and shipped on a truck a long ways. So I really think local coffee is the best way to go. So please don't go out and search for Humboldt Bay coffee unless you're around Humboldt. Do search for the coffee that is in your area. Maybe it'll be the next state over, but you should be able to find some coffee that is close to you. And there are a bunch of websites that can kind of help you locate coffee that way. There's one called Sprudge. I think they're still around. I'm not quite sure how to spell that off the top of my head. I will try to put a link to their website down in the description of this video if you are trying to locate some coffee close to you. They're a really good resource for that. But also Google is just a really good resource for that. And I am really wanting to dive into my coffee instead of chats, but this is a coffee chat. And because you're not here to chat with me, I have to do all the chatting. So now I have a dilemma, don't I? I'm going to take another sip, though. That is very good coffee. I'm really happy that I found this, and I'm a little bit upset that it's not available in every store. This particular Humboldt's finest variety here. So I'm happy that I finally found it. Yeah, and I don't know if you can tell, I'm a little extra tired here today. This is one of those days where I wished I would get a little charge out of coffee, but I get no caffeine kick, and so that makes me wish that I did in a moment like this. Yeah, I had a former friend text me at about 3 in the morning the other morning, woke me up, and I did not get back to sleep, and so it's put me off of my sleep schedule, and I've been struggling to get back on my sleep schedule. So it's actually quite late at the moment, but it just seemed like a good time to sit down and chat, because I do try to keep the sound levels as good as I can, and I have been city-bound lately, which means lots of people walking around the outside of my van, lots of cars going by. I'm not quite sure if we've had any go by right now since we've been chatting, but it has seemed to be quieter, so I guess this was a good time to do this. And usually when I drink a cup of coffee, if I can get myself to lay right down and get my head on the pillow and just try to fall asleep, usually a nice cup of coffee in my belly does help me fall asleep quicker. So I'm hoping that will be the case, although that does mean I'm going to have to put all of this away. And I do have quite a bit of an arrangement going on right now. So there's quite a bit of work to do when I set up these little coffee chats. It always seems like they're rather simple. And they really are not. For some reason, they're just a little bit complicated, and I really need to kind of figure that out. I need to be able to set these up a little bit quicker and get them done a little bit quicker, because this is a big setup here. I don't know if you noticed that. I don't know if that comes across or not, but I've got lighting. I've actually got 2 different microphones running at the moment. And yeah, it's just a complicated setup. With that, though, I'm getting tired, and I'm wanting to turn my attention to my coffee. So maybe I should do that. Maybe we should just call this quits here tonight. And I hope you're drinking some really good coffee or tea or hot chocolate or water or whatever it is you're drinking. And I should probably throw some alcoholic beverages into that as well, because I know that is what some people drink. I never do, but some people do. So yeah, whatever you're drinking, I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you're having an enjoyable day, if it's an end of your day, which usually it is. Usually people watch these to settle down at night. So hopefully it's been an enjoyable day, and I hope you have a great day tomorrow. And as always, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it.